Welcome, welcome. Who's over there? I see one. You beat me to the punch. Hi, Brienne. Happy Monday. Now I'm home for my notebook. Happy Monday. How are you doing? And you know what I'm going to say next. Hi, Pumpkin. Today is the 7th. Thank you much. Thank you much. All right, chapter 23. You're tired. I'm sorry to hear that, but I hope you're able to get some rest this evening. Hi, Letitia. How are you? I'm doing pretty good, Brienne. I started a new job today, so I, like you, am a little bit tired, but we're going to get this done. Chapter 20, thank you much. Thank you much. Brienne was on 23. Brienne, you have 23 and 24, and you're done with the reading. How are you feeling right now? Inquiring minds want to know. Letitia, 20. You got 4 chapters left to go. Excited? Yeah, I'm excited for you. So I know today we're going to get into chapter 22, I think is where we left off last week. Yes, because you are, friend. Because you started it and you are about to finish it. You are accomplished. Well done. If nothing else, you read that content and you are now very well aware of what it takes to maintain sterile instrumentation in the hospital system. That's a healthy body of knowledge to have, even if you never work in the field, because all of us at some point are touched by surgery, some type of procedure, right? Where we're coming in contact with sterile instruments. So if nothing else, you are at least walking through the world a little more competent about what's going on around you. And I think that's nice. I think that's nice. So when you go to the OBGYN and they bring them speculum, you come in the room and that speculum is already out that pill pack, you know we have a problem. Hi, Aisha. How are you? How are you? And what chapter are you on in the reading, my love? Okay. So before we get started, so we're going to get into chapter 22 today, which is about safety and risk management in sterile processing or central service. Thank you, love. 17. Okay. And then I also prepare for you guys to have for yourselves a little practice exam to test you over the vocabulary and just some basic concepts, getting ready to start thinking about testing for the CRCST. So when we log out of class tonight, that will be available for you guys to download on the file share. Hi, Tiki Taki. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ignore y'all. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And thank you for tapping the screen. I appreciate that. So you'll have that. I'm going to try to create a few more of those for y'all just to have the practice. But also, I know I say it every class, but do utilize that workbook that comes with your set, because it does have quite a few exams, quizzes in there for you guys to practice with that are going to get you ready to start thinking about how those questions are going to be presented to you on the test. And of course, the flashcard spiel, y'all can hear it. I ain't got to say it because I've said it 1,000 times. All right, so that'll be up. And then also the class notes for tonight's chapters, which are 23 and 24, will be up. So that means, at least for my edition, my 8th edition, I know your guys' updated book is a little bit different, but at least for my standards, you are now in possession of all the information I have to prepare you for the CRCST exam. It'll all be available for you on the file share, and all the past classes are available to you on the YouTube in the live section, okay? So the only thing I asked is that you guys make sure to send me an email and let me know that you have been active in the class, because when you guys are done, I'm going to put that all into a private link and only you guys will have access to it, okay? We're going to move back into offering paid classes, but I want to make sure, because I know some of us came in at different points, that you maintain access to your coursework, all right, until you get done with your CRCST exam. All right, so that will be made available to you. And if you need any additional support, if it comes to looking for externships, if it comes to preparing your resume for job applications, to getting ready for interview processes, if you need additional support, I also have some discounted packages for you guys on those one-on-one meetings, because as I know I've told you many, many times, I am greatly appreciative of you just as much as I know you guys are appreciative of getting this information. Okay. So without further ado, let's get into the end of this book. If you have questions over what you've been reading, no matter what chapter you're on, I know we're going to be covering 22 and probably 23 today. But whatever chapter you're on, if you have questions about the reading, the vocabulary, concepts, anything that you want to ask, now's the time, because we are live. All right. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to send me an email, and I will draw. I know most of y'all should have that already, but I'm gonna go ahead and drop it in the chat just in case, and then we'll get started. Also, I thank y'all very much for completing the survey. I'm going to drop that link as well, just in case there's anybody here today that hasn't had an opportunity to fill it out. I would greatly appreciate your feedback. All right. Okay, so let's get notes up on the screen for chapter 23. Excuse me, 22. I'm trying to get y'all out the door. Can you believe we've been going since February? My goodness. All right, chapter 22. Let me put it over there. That way I can see y'all's comments too. Okay. Chapter 22 is going over safety and risk management for central service. And the reason why we're saying safety and risk management, because I know throughout the course so far, we've been talking about all these different things that you guys can do to keep yourself safe and keep the patient safe. But the reason why this chapter is also adding in risk management is because everything that we have been talking about is about mitigating risk. We want to reduce the opportunity to transmit microbes. We're mitigating risk. We know that people are coming to the hospital sick. They're bringing all kinds of germs. Our job is to make sure that nobody is capturing any because of us, okay? So that means we have to be at every point interrupting that process. We've done it through physical means, like wearing our personal protective equipment. We're going to do it by manual cleaning with our detergents, by chemical means. We have even giving you processes to think about how you do your processes, right? So we looked at that in the last chapter. How do we check for quality? How do we track for quality? What kind of data will we want to be looking for to even be able to tell if what we're doing is making any sense, right? So all along the way, you guys have been talking about risk management, and we're going to formalize it here in this chapter. Okay, so learning objectives. By the end of this chapter, you guys should be able to define safety and risk management in central service, identify common workplace hazards in sterile processing, understand occupational safety and health administration regulations. Some of those are going to be repeat for you as we get to the end of this chapter, but we repeat it because it is absolutely critical. We're going to explain how to handle hazardous chemicals and biohazardous materials, discuss the importance of proper ergonomics and injury prevention. And I'm going to hang a lot of time in there, not because it's heavily going to be represented on your tests, but because it is so important for you guys as technicians to understand proper ergonomics and to protect yourselves from injury. Because all day long, you guys are going to be picking up trays that at a minimum or at a maximum are supposed to be 25 pounds. That repetitive, even just picking up and setting down, is going to be exposing you to additional risk, right? So we want to be looking at how do we move properly in that workspace to protect our bodies, because you absolutely need it in order to work in central service, right? And then lastly, I want to make sure you guys understand emergency response procedures in sterile process. Okay, so introduction to safety and risk management. Defining safety and risk management, we're looking at safety management as the practice of implementing procedures and policies to reduce workplace injuries and hazards. Very big umbrella. Okay. And you guys are going to see some things like we've seen already, like with eye wash stations. That's safety management. We're putting in a practice or a procedure to reduce the likelihood of you being hurt at work. And then with risk management, we're identifying, assessing, and controlling risk to prevent harm to employees and patients. So with risk management, we're going to be using a lot of those, like that Six Sigma information we looked at, to take a look at our processes and figure out, are there places where we're failing? Are there places where people have an opportunity to get hurt? And then what can we do to make things different so that those opportunities are reduced? And then the importance of safety in central service, I mean, it really should go without saying, but first and foremost, it protects you, protects the staff from workplace injuries. And your workplace injuries could be like some other people's, you could stumble and fall on a wet spill, but you also have this increased risk because you're dealing with biohazardous waste, right? So we want to take a look at what that looks like. We want to ensure compliance with OSHA regulations to maintain a safe work environment. And this is one of those things that's twofold. This is about protecting you as an individual and also protecting your hospital as an institution. Because as we've looked at in previous chapters, OSHA requires your hospital to provide certain things for you so that you are safe. You create a compromised situation when you fail to use them. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we're reducing the risk of any type of associated improper sterilization or instrument handling. Okay. So I know one of the homework assignments in the TikToks a while back was to go and Google sterile processing and see if you can find a article about an outbreak or about a sterilization breakdown, because they're not hard to find, right? So we want to make sure that we reduce any risk associated with improper sterilization and exposure for patients. So what are some common workplace hazards in central service? Some physical hazards. It's very easy to have slips, trips, and falls. We're cleaning instruments, so we're dealing with water. We're also sterilizing with steam sterilization. And although that should not be creating any condensation that is coming out onto your floors, sometimes if a sterilizer is malfunctioning, you can have leaks. You can have leaks from your washers. You can have just water spilling from containers that are not properly closed inside of a case cart, right? So there's all these opportunities for our floors to be wet. Also, misplaced items can cause injuries. So we move a lot of carts. We talked in that last chapter about case carts and exchange carts, stock carts. What's the man said? Shrimp burgers, shrimp tacos. There's a cart for everything. It's very easy to have an area that has previously been unobstructed. You come there today, and now there's linen bins everywhere, and you're not expecting, you're not paying attention, and now you done tripped and you done fallen. All right, then we have sharps injuries. Handling surgical instruments and sharps poses a risk for cuts and punctures, partially because some of the surgical instruments that you guys are going to be cleaning are designed to cut and puncture, right? We're going to be dealing with keratins that are designed to create holes in bone. So yeah, if you get your finger pinched in there, you can do some damage. You're going to be dealing with scissors. You're going to be dealing with curettes. You're going to be dealing with any type of waste that the operating room failed to remove. And although that absolutely should not happen, it does happen. So sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where they forgot to remove the surgical blades, or they left a needle stuck into the needle holders that they were using for suture. And now you've poked yourself through your glove and you have been exposed to whatever it is that patient may or may not have had. Right, so sharp injuries are increased for you guys. Then we also have chemical hazards. You're going to have sterilant exposure. So we went through a chapter where we talked about all these different chemicals that we can use to provide sterilization. And every single one of them is so not safe for you to be exposed to, right? So we're doing that in a controlled way. If I had an ethylene oxide canister and it was to rupture, that would be something I would be very concerned about. I would want to vacate that room. We would have to be talking about ventilation. We would have to contact our APA, right? So there's all types of opportunity for us to be exposed to sterilant. And hopefully it's one of those situations where your infection preventionist and your sterile processing manager are consistently looking at their processes to make sure that there's limited opportunities for that to take place. All right. So then also you're going to have in your hospital systems, it is required for them to provide you all with material safety data sheets or safety data sheets. You'll hear them pronounced both ways. I think the nomenclature now is more geared towards safety data sheets, dropping the material, but you may see both. They're the same thing. And it's something that a lot of hospitals these days will have on what they call their intranet, which is your internal internet system. They'll have it on their homepage somewhere for you to access, but they're required to have for you these material safety data sheets. Okay, so these are documents that provide safety information on hazardous materials. These are going to be documents that tell you what kind of chemicals are involved in that, whatever, let's say it's a bottle of detergent. It's going to tell you what kind of chemicals are in that detergent, what to do if you get it in your eye, what to do if you ingest it in your mouth, what to do if you have spilled it and you don't know how to clean it up. So that MSDS sheet or that SDS sheet is going to have that information on it for you. You can think of it like when you call poison control, which you also have the option to do. But it's all there in a document for you. And then lastly, of course, I want to hesitate to say most prominently, but probably most prominently is your biological hazards. You guys are cleaning bodily fluids. So you're going to have a high chance or opportunity to come in contact with bloodborne pathogens. These are bacteria or viruses that are present in blood that cause infections. I know that's repeat information for y'all on chapter 22, but biohazardous waste is going to be any waste that is containing infectious material. The gag is in sterile processing and decontam, you don't know, right? All you know is that you have received a case card of surgical instruments with blood on them or feces on them or phlegm on them. You don't know what the patient has. Now, this is also why it's incredibly critical for you guys to maintain your record system within your operating room. So if that looks like scanning your case card when you receive it to your decontam, or if that looks like writing down the case number for the case card that you just received, because those are ways for you to backtrack. Let's say the SCT did leave a needle in there and you got stuck. I've had that happen to a couple of my employees across my 16 years. What do we do then? We have to contact the OR and we have to contact that patient's team and get that information and find out, do they have any type of communicable diseases that we know about? Do we need to be prophylactically thinking about HIV? What type of risk have I just come in contact with? It's another reason why, like that video that I showed you guys where I was coming through decontam and checking that case card and I had no gloves on. Crazy. Right? It's crazy. But I posted that not to show you, not to say, oh God, look at this time I was being a horrible technician, but to demonstrate to you that even somebody with this body of knowledge and that many years in the field can make that type of simple mistake of coming in and thinking it's not that big of a risk. It's always that big of a risk because you don't know what that patient has. So you must treat everything dirty as if, okay, and clean it appropriately. That's why I said we don't accept instruments from another facility and say, oh, they cleaned it at that facility, so we don't have to clean it here. I wasn't there. I wasn't there. So I don't know. If I don't know, then I have to take it through my processes and guarantee cleanliness. I have to take it through my processes and guarantee sterilization. I can't trust you and say, oh, I know Letitia, she always on top of it. I'm just gonna take it from her. We got it, we good. No. That's why we don't do that. Then we got proper handling procedures. So you want to have, when you receive your case cards and decontam, there's going to be an opportunity for you to segregate your waste. You can think of it like when you guys have trash and you have recycling, right? I might put certain things in the trash can, certain things go in the recycling, certain paper goes in this bin. It's the same concept. You'll have different bins based on whether or not it's sharps involved, whether or not there's chemicals involved. So like, let's say we're getting instruments from a cancer procedure unit where they're giving out chemo. If we had any type of disposable waste from any patient that's been exposed to chemo, we're not putting that in a regular trash can. We're going to put that in a designated trash can. Same thing for anything that has a lot of blood on it, right? So you guys will learn in your field what that looks like, because certain things, if they're not like soaked or dripping in blood, can go in regular trash. But if you have a red biohazard bin next to you and it's got blood on it, I just say put it in but there is some guidance around that. So you will be responsible for removing and segregating that waste in your decontam, whether it's infectious, chemical, or radioactive waste. And it really just depends on your hospital facility, how much, if any, you come in contact with. Like for us, in the last few facilities I've had, most of our cancer units, they dealt with all of their instrumentation separately. So I never really had to deal with radioactive waste. Dealt with some types of chemical waste. And then, of course, for us, what's going to be the most prominent one is dealing with infectious waste, or waste that we're assuming is infectious because we do not know the status of that patient. This is why OSHA, this is why EPA, this is why Joint Commission, this is why CMS, this is why everybody is going to get on top of you about your container labeling. So you must use a hazard classification that contains a description and the disposal instructions on the container. This is standard fare in the hospital network. So 9 times out of 10, you won't be able to go anywhere where they don't already have these bins available to you. You won't be reinventing the wheel on this. Most important thing is just making sure you guys are able to recognize it. All right, so the MSDS sheets we just talked about a little bit. These are going to provide details on the chemical composition, the hazards, and the protective measures, and your first aid instructions. So like I said earlier, depending on how you spill it, how you ingest it, how you come in contact with it, they might have different procedures for you as far as first aid instructions are concerned. This is also why we pay so much attention to our eye wash stations. This is also why it's so important to know where your first aid kits are. I can't say that I've had a lot of, for instance, I've had a chemical exposure once because I had a Sterile burn from a hydrogen peroxide cassette that I didn't dispose of properly. I was not wearing gloves. See how that go? The gloves they provided for me. And I had, it comes out, it's like a little white burn on your skin, right? So we were able to go, in that situation, I was able to go to employee health and have them guide me through accessing the MSDS. But that's also something that I would have had access to in the department, where I was able to get on the internet and find out what to do and what not to do. And I know that it sounds scary, and y'all might not even never remember this by the time y'all get into your jobs. But when you do have something like that happen, a spill or a chemical burn or something to that nature, unless it's something that is like it's burning, I got run to the emergency room, try not to panic and get the information first, because sometimes you can make a situation worse by doing what you think is the most common sense thing. I'm gonna just go rinse it off. Well, in that situation, because that hydrogen peroxide is the way that it was set up in that container, me actually going to run my hand under clean cold water would have made it worse. So, try to do your best to get the information before you react. All right. So now we talk a little bit about spills, slips, falls, physical injuries. Let's talk about some of the safety measures around sterilization areas and how to be prepared to make those areas safe. So sterilization equipment safety. The biggest thing I could say with autoclaves is ensuring that you properly load them to avoid burns and avoid steam exposure. The number one injury I see in a sterile processing department, I'll give you my top 2 I see. One is burns from the steam sterilizer, and that's simply because, think about that metal rack. I'm putting these instruments on top of that metal rack. I pull this huge thing out of the sterilizer, and I've got my gloves on, my big oven mitts, and I'm getting stuff, but I done reached in, and just like this, now my gloves stop here. I done reached in, I done hit my wrist. So a lot of us oftentimes will get little burns on our wrist or on the tops of our hands because we reached farther back into the sterilizer container than we had glove to reach. Okay. It's not something that you, of course, have to be like, oh, I'm just going to get burned because I'm an SPD tech. But it's something that does happen because it's a common exposure, it's common risk for us. And then the second one I would say is just injuries around lifting, because we do so much picking up and moving, pushing, pulling of carts. So making sure that we have good ergonomic safety is really important in the SPD department. So with Low temperature sterilizers, because that autoclave, that's the one that gets up to the 275 degrees, right? That when that metal comes out, it's hot. That's why we let it cool down before we start putting things away on the sterile storage. But with the low temp sterilizers, the biggest thing you want to make sure of is that there's proper ventilation and monitoring in that room to make sure that you are compliant with OSHA and EPA standards. You don't want to be in a situation where you find out months later that the place where you've been doing hydrogen peroxide sterilization does not have proper ventilation. These are things you can ask. These are things you can check for. Preparation and storage safety. So we've sterilized the instruments. Now we've moved on to sterile storage. Biggest things for those areas, making sure we have proper airflow. That's for you and for your sterile packages. We want to make sure that the air in those rooms is clean. There's no sense in us creating these sterile packages and then putting them in a dirty room. And then sterile storage precautions. You want to ensure sterility is maintained by following proper handling techniques. So picking instruments up, moving things in a proper way, not dragging instrument sets that are wrapped across each other. There's little ways you can start to compromise the integrity of a sterile package. So just want to be mindful of proper handling. And that one is more so safety for your patient, right, versus necessarily for the staff member. But keeping in mind that, again, there's no sense in us going through this process of decontaminating, checking these instruments for workability, packaging them, sterilizing them, keeping them on sterile storage, only for you to get to the last possible second and snag it on the shelf. Does it happen? Yes. Do we have processes to remediate that? Yes. But we want to try to reduce the risk for that. Okay. So we talked about some safety mitigation in the department. I also want to talk to you guys about emergency response and disaster planning. Emergency response and disaster planning is something that is going to be dictated to you as a technician, right? Your managers, your leadership is going to be the ones telling you what you do in case of a fire, what you do in case of a flood, what you do in case of an active shooter, what you do. All of that will come to you in your orientation. That's really important for you to take. The trouble, of course, with disasters is they don't happen every day. That you're keeping practice on this information, it can be to forget it. Biggest one you're going to run into, I think every year we did this, was the fire safety, which is the RACE protocol. And so if you were to come across a fire in your department, and it can happen, I've definitely had it happen. You got to think about surgery. We deal with like cautery machines, dealing with different chemicals. So I think the most common one I've seen scan fires in the operating room. So, I come into the soil utility room and there's a fire. The first thing I'm going to do is rescue. I have to rescue anyone in danger. If there are any patients or staff that are in immediate danger, I want to move them to a safe place. The next thing you're going to do is alarm. So you're going to do asking someone to activate the fire alarm for you. We want to contain the fire. So most often, especially by the time you trip that fire alarm, most hospital systems are designed for their doors to automatically close these days. They hinge on these huge magnets. But that being said, if for whatever reason that door doesn't close automatically, you want to do your best to close the doors, close the windows, and contain the fire as much as it is safe for you to do. And if it's not safe for you to do so, you need to vacate the area. And then lastly, if it is safe for you to do so, we want you to extinguish the fire. Okay, so if there's a fire extinguisher near you, or if it's a water you can toss on there, and that's a safe thing to do, because again, we're dealing with different chemicals that might not be the appropriate thing to do. You want to try to do your best to extinguish the fire. The biggest things I'll say with this is alarm, so that you can get reinforcements coming in if your hospital system isn't already doing that. Sometimes a fire can smolder for quite a while before it builds up enough smoke to trip off the fire alarms. So if you come across one, make sure you get everybody to safety and then pull those alarms. The RACE protocol is something I will put on a flashcard. Disaster plans. So hospitals will have written disaster plans for fires, floods, and hazardous material spills. Those disaster plans should be made available to you in your departments. You can always ask to see them as well in your, in your hospital process. But what they're going to do is essentially give you the guidelines for what do we do when this disaster takes place. Employees must be trained and they must participate in regular drills. It's just part of your a part of your job. Is going to be every so often, usually at least yearly. You will be required to complete some level of training about disaster preparedness. A lot is computer based these days, but sometimes you do also have active drills. Like I know early in my career, we used to actually go out with the fire department to practice utilizing fire extinguishers. But like I said, most of the time, this education these days is web based. Okay, so you heard me harping on it earlier. Ergonomics and injury prevention. So, ergonomics is the study of designing work environments to reduce physical strain and improve efficiency. Within your hospital systems, ergonomics whole department, okay, that you can actually have come down to your department and do a study, and they will watch you and they will see how you work and how you lift and how you twist and how you move, and they might make recommendations for different types of equipment for you to have in your department, or what are safe workflow times in your department. I kid you not, one time I had a group of technicians. It was my first time being a manager, and I was managing union staff, and they were complaining that the working 8 hours straight in decontam was not ergonomically safe. Now, for me, that was the way I had been trained my entire career. I didn't see a problem with it. I did not understand what the issue was, but I had also not been working in decontam for 8 hours for some time because I had moved into management. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna argue with you about it. Let's get the people down here and find out. So we called and we had them come and do an ergonomic study in our decontam. And the information that we got back from that, we changed the way that we were doing almost everything in that room. I started scheduling them for shorter shifts in there. We started going 4 hours at a time. We started doing no more than 3 days in a row, regardless of how many hours they worked in decontam. And keep in mind, I had some staff that they preferred to be there. That's where they wanted to be, 8 hours a day, every single day. And I let them work where they felt most comfortable, especially when I feel like somebody has become an expert at something. That's an invaluable experience. But I also made sure to schedule them in such a way that they would get breaks, because the ergonomic study came back and let us know, actually, that's not that safe. They are at risk. And so again, your body, you're using your body and SPD to do everything. So it's advantageous for the hospital system just as much as it is for you guys to set your workflow up in a way that reduces physical strain and improves efficiency. Because if you get hurt, you go out, I don't have anybody to process the trays. That's not safe for the patients, and definitely not a great situation for your healthcare system. So, best practices for ergonomics, if I could impart anything on you guys, it would be proper lifting techniques. Bend at your knees and lift with your legs to avoid back injuries. Keep instrumentation close to your body so that you don't have all of this weight that you're extending your lower back out. Most of your hospital systems these days will have adjustable workstations, and those are designed to reduce strains from repetitive tasks. Adjustable workstations will be some that will actually adjust up and down depending on your height. So you're never trying to reach up, if you're too short for the thing, or you constantly bending over if you're too tall. You're able to put them at your height. More and more, we're starting to see in decontam that they're installing adjustable sink systems as well. So same concept, you won't have to bend over deep into this, 5-10 gallon sink. You can adjust it to your height. And then we want to use the assistance of devices if we can. So there might be some equipment that can be purchased by the department to help you put things away, to help reduce the strain, maybe certain type of push carts you guys want to move to. It's just something I would say keep in mind to be thinking about. You can always ask, You're welcome. Thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. You're absolutely welcome. Okay. So, and Andrea, if you've been with me for a little while, drop where you are in the reading. I appreciate it. So that was all my notes for chapter 22. Let me switch over to 23. And of course, again, if you guys have questions about any place you are with the reading, just ask. I'm happy to answer. Okay, so chapter 23, second to last chapter in this textbook. We have gone through all of the technical information. There will be no more coming to you. We have talked about all things cleaning, processing, sterilizing, storing, and distributing surgical instrumentation. These last two chapters, we're going to talk about what it looks like for you to have successful careers. Okay. We're going to talk about the skills that you need to have in order to be considered a successful employee, the things that your leadership is going to be looking for, your hiring manager is going to be looking for, your teammates are going to be looking for. Because please don't forget, all of this is taking place with multiple people, right? I'm not the only one in decontam. I'm not the only one in processing. I'm not the only one in sterilization, and so on and so forth. So you guys have to have certain level of soft skills in order to be successful with this. 23, yay! Thank you. I appreciate that. And Andrea, I dropped the link in the chat to a survey. If you haven't had a chance to fill that out, if you don't mind, I would greatly appreciate your feedback. Okay, so chapter 23. Chapter 23 is talking about success through communication. If you don't have good communication skills, you're going to want to practice those before you go into that hospital system. Please don't get on people's nerves like that. Okay, because you have to talk to people. You have to talk to people, and you have to talk to people a lot. And you have to talk to people clearly, and you have to talk to people a lot. Okay, it might look like you taking phone calls from the operating room about what instrumentation they need, what room it needs to go to, what patient is on the table. It might look like you talking to these ancillary departments and finding out where they need you to deliver things or pick things up from. You might be talking to senior leadership when they come down to find out what it is you need. You might be talking to your leadership in your department, communicating with your lead techs to figure out who's going to lunch when, so we know that the department is covered. You're going to be talking to folks all day and all night. Okay, so you want to make sure you can do it well. So with chapter 23, the big objectives there is to define what communication is and describe its essential elements. We also want to identify the differences between verbal, nonverbal, written, and electronic communication. And make no mistakes, all forms of adult communication are enforceable by policy. If you think that you're going to go into the hospital system and you're going to be a person that rolls your eyes every time somebody talks to you, you will find yourself in human resources talking about your communication. Okay, because at any time you are considered creating a hostile work environment, we have a problem. If I cannot talk to you, that means we cannot work. If we can't work, we cannot ensure our patients are safe. You're compromising my ability to get my job done. Okay. I used to tell my staff every time I started with them, I only have two objectives. The first one is to keep my patients safe. The second one is to keep you resourced so you can keep my patients safe. That's it. There's only two things I care about. If it falls outside that wheelhouse, move along. Okay. So nobody has time for that is what I'm trying to insinuate to you. And the reason why I'm pushing it is because, again, I sat in that seat. I could go on for hours with the amount of asinine conversations I've had with grown-ups at work. This ain't the place to do that. You want to do that? Go to McDonald's, go to Walmart, go to Target, go somewhere else. Do not come into the hospital system with those type of attitudes. You will get somebody hurt, whether you know it or not. You will get somebody hurt. So we're going to talk about what barriers to effective communication look like in a healthcare setting, because you could be creating those unbeknownst to you, and somebody might have to check you about it. Yes, talk to him, Aisha. You got to talk to him. There's no getting around it. You have to be able to communicate. So I don't want to hear that, I don't like to talk to people. Then this is not the job for you. Do you have to sit in front of somebody's face all day, every day? No. But you do have to be able to communicate. I want you guys to understand the role of feedback and active listening. You will be at minimum exposed to feedback at least once a year in the hospital system, because your manager is going to do a review with you every year of your performance. Every time you sit down with them, if they're a good manager, I'll say, they should be giving you feedback about things they want you to improve, and they should be giving you feedback about things that they think are awesome and they want you to continue to do. You have to be able to receive that. None of us are perfect. So be open to getting feedback from your team members and be open to being an active listener. I want you guys to be able to recognize the importance of teamwork and collaboration in SPD. And then lastly, demonstrate the strategies for improving workplace communication. So what is communication? Its official definition, what you're throwing on that flashcard. This is the process of exchanging information, thoughts, and feelings between individuals through speaking, writing, gestures, or other means. Okay, and other means might come up through your electronic tracking system. You might have whiteboards where you leave notes for each other. There might be all kinds of ways that you guys are communicating with each other. Essentially, the feedback loop of communication is going to look like you having a sender. So that's going to be the individual that initiates the message itself, which is the information that we have contained and we want to convey to someone else. Then there has to be somebody on the receiving end. That's the individual who interprets and responds to this message. And I specifically used interpret for the reason that just because you said it one way does not mean that they understood it that way. And that matters. Okay? And feedback. This is going to be the response given by the receiver that confirms their understanding or prompts clarification. Okay, so quickly, types of communication. We have verbal communication, which is our spoken word, our tone of voice, our clarity. So I talked about if I roll my eyes every single time somebody talks to me, I can do the same thing with my tone. If I have this rude and depressed